I'm Doug Seven of Amazon Web Services. We're helping organizations of all sizes across all industries around the world build their next big solutions with AI. We're on the edge of AI, where curiosity is transformed into possibility. Keep listening.
Hello, AI podcast passengers. Jump on in. Here's what's to come on today's journey. Find out why Amazon Q's coding and companion empowers developers with AI-powered code suggestions, and from AWS on how we should expect generative AI to impact all of us in the coming years. Finally, what's really top of mind for artificial intelligence inside one of the big four. All this and more. Take your seat.
Welcome aboard the Edge of AI podcast. Snap into your safety belt and prepare to explore the depths of the rapidly expanding AI universe. Each episode is a dispatch featuring hyper-relevant reports from the pilots, pioneers, and passengers aboard the AI rocket ship. We explore the latest use cases and developments in AI, hear from experts building tech, and learn how this disruptive force is transforming industries and society.
Welcome aboard the Edge of AI podcast. Snap into your safety belt and prepare to explore the depths of the rapidly expanding AI universe. Each episode is a dispatch featuring hyper-relevant reports from the pilots, pioneers, and passengers aboard the AI rocket ship. We explore the latest use cases and developments in AI, hear from experts building the tech, empower you to enhance your life with AI, and learn how this disruptive force is transforming industries and society. Welcome aboard. I'm Ron Levy, your captain for today's voyage. Just like most of you, I've embraced the spirit of exploration throughout my life, from starting my own business before graduating high school to traversing the world's most challenging terrains. I've always sought out new frontiers. I built one of the largest award-winning custom home companies, and most recently, I've navigated complex regulations while founding and leading a public company that is dedicated to applying technology and training. Today's episode, it features Doug Seven. He is the director and managing and general manager of AI developer experiences at Amazon Web Services. Doug has over 20 years of leadership in cloud computing and software development. He specializes in generative AI to streamline software development by leading Amazon Q for developers and its coding companion, which is Amazon Code Whisperer, which offers AI-powered suggestions, code suggestions that is, and conversations about the code within popular IDEs or integrated development environments. He's also pivotal in the development of Amazon Code Guru Security, enhancing developer security practices, and Amazon Code Catalyst, enabling developer teams to quickly build and deliver applications on AWS. Prior to Amazon, he worked with Telerik, Atomic, and Microsoft, where he spent several years in the developer division, working on tools like Visual Studio, Visual Studio Online, and Team Foundation Server. AWS is the forefront of artificial intelligence, providing a vast array of AI and machine learning services at all levels, and the generative AI stack for users of all skill levels, from comprehensive cloud infrastructure to developing generative AI applications to specialized services for analytics, coding, vision, and speech. AWS enables organizations to innovate swiftly, securely, and responsibly, leveraging AWS's robust and scalable cloud platform. Business can unlock new insights, improve operational efficiency, and accelerate their machine learning journeys with confidence. Doug, welcome to the Edge of AI podcast.
Thank you, Ron. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're very excited as well. This is going to be an amazing podcast we're going to record here with what you represent. It's just fantastic.
I wish I had a seatbelt to strap in with. I'm ready to go.
I love it. You've been in the AI space for quite a while now, from leading cloud-based solutions at Microsoft to spearheading initiatives at AWS with Amazon Q and Amazon Code Whisperer. Tell us, what was the pivotal moment that drew you into the world of AI?
It's a hard one to answer, Ron. I'm not sure there was any sort of single, aha moment or pivotal moment for what drew me to artificial intelligence. I've been for the bulk of the last 20 years or so, I've been in some way, shape, or form involved in sort of simplifying things for developers, building developer tools, focusing on developer productivity. And we've always had, or as technologies evolve, we've had ways of applying things like machine learning into that and doing things to help developers do what they do faster, better, stronger. And now we're at this like convergence where all the things we imagined over the years that we would love to be able to do, we're finally able to do because this sort of convergence of lower cost, higher scale compute with a lot of experimentation that's happened in the space of like foundation models and large language models, which has really come together to give us some of these capabilities. So over the last, I don't know, a couple of decades, we've often thought about all these things that we could do, and maybe it's like spending too much time watching science fiction as a kid, and even as an adult, that got me excited about artificial intelligence and how to apply it in this space, and in particular, in a space that I'm super passionate about, which is developers and building software.
Yeah, that's the technical side of you, but I think you described it really well in that we've been prepping for it for so long that it finally comes to be, and it becomes a sprint at the length of a marathon, I'll call it. So, right? So let's talk for a moment about your AI-powered productivity tool for IDE and the command line. There's a lot to unpack. Yeah. What is Amazon doing for AI? And give me a quick overview of AWS's purpose-built AI offerings.
Yeah. So our approach is really to try to help any company who wants to be more successful with AI or even become an AI company as we watch these companies sort of go through these transformations. We watch companies go kind of into this digital transformation and now into this AI transformation. And so we want to be there to make that possible and help them do that. And so we provide services across, you can imagine it as three layers of a stack diagram. So at the bottom layer, we have purpose-built infrastructure and capabilities for organizations that want to kind of do it yourself. So people who want to build and train and run their own models, whether that's using our Amazon SageMaker infrastructure or the chipsets that we've designed specifically around artificial intelligence, Trainium for training large models and Inferentia for running the inferencing for large models. So for organizations who are looking to kind of do more themselves, we have that at the bottom layer. The middle layer, we start to abstract some of that away and provide more what you can imagine is pre-built or pre-constructed building blocks to an artificial intelligence solution or application. So for example, Amazon Bedrock is our foundation model hosting service where organizations can build applications without having to know a lot about how to build and train the models, but they can use either our own first-party models like Titan or third-party models like Anthropic Claude or Llama 2 or some of these other models to build their own AI applications. So they get the benefit of that abstraction over that bottom layer. And then at the top layer, so if you think of that middle layer as the kind of do it with me model of, hey, I want to build the application, but I don't want to deal with building and training the models. And then at the top layer is a further abstraction of, I'll say, do it for me. Give me the applications that leverage artificial intelligence and leverage that entire stack to meet the needs of my use case and give me artificial intelligence capabilities that help me. So things like Amazon Q, which is our digital assistant for software development using AWS, or AWS Health Scribe, which is an artificial intelligence enabled scenario around healthcare scenarios for transcribing and understanding patient information. These are abstractions of that full stack where instead of having to build and train and do all these other things, I'm just getting the benefit of the artificial intelligence application. So kind of wherever an organization is, from the, I want to do it myself, I want you to do it with me, or I just want you to do it for me and I want the benefit of that, we have a solution to help those organizations out.
And do you have all three of those solutions now, or are they still building?
Both, I would say. We have them all now, but we're continuing to evolve, right? So we have, for example, I mentioned Trainium and Inferentia are purpose-built chipsets for artificial intelligence. Those exist today, and you can use those. In fact, a lot of what we build in Amazon Q runs on that chipset. Amazon Bedrock is available today, and you can use a variety of first and third-party models with that. And again, parts of what we build for Amazon Q run on Amazon Bedrock. And then Amazon Q and Health Scribe and some of these other AI services exist today as well.
So do you have to be an AWS user and be using your, I'll call them web servers for lack of a deeper term, um, in order to use these, or are these separate that obviously still rely on those, but can a user go straight to Q and just use that, or is it only for people that are already using AWS?
So Amazon Q, for example, is designed for a broad set of use cases. It doesn't. It's not limited to focusing only on AWS, but there's a variety of scenarios that we enable. So if you're an AWS customer and you're heavily using AWS services, there's more that Q can do for you in terms of having Amazon Q available to you in the AWS management console and help you with things like troubleshooting issues and things like that. But if you're maybe outside of that, maybe a little bit abstracted away from that, you're a developer working in your development environment. Maybe you use AWS for some things. Maybe you're in a company that has a multi-cloud strategy and you use other providers or on-premises technology for some things. Amazon Q can help you with that as well. And so, as a assistant and coding companion, we want to make sure we can help you be successful in whatever you're doing, but of course, be the most successful using AWS.
It's pretty fantastic. And what really is making sense to me is you are absolutely enabling companies that don't have any prior machine learning experience at all, yet they can go in at one of those levels, the one that suits them best, and end up developing / utilizing the AI products. And that in itself, it's just a revolutionary game changer to be able to have non-machine learning companies building their dreams, utilizing it.
Yeah. Well, and this is what's so exciting about this, right? I talk to lots of customers regularly, and we'll have customers who have depth of knowledge in artificial intelligence and have experience and have large data science organizations, and they really want our SageMaker infrastructure or Trainium chipsets or things like that. But we have lots of customers who we talk to who are have ideas around what they believe AI can do for them, but maybe don't have that skill set or that expertise or that staff to do some of those things, but want to take advantage of some of these capabilities. So things like Bedrock that expose the language models or the foundation models as services, and that they can call through an API and they can fine tune them and use them in different ways, lower the bar, if you will, to entry for someone who's building an artificial intelligence application. We have a really fascinating service for people to experiment with. There's a product we have called Party Rock. If you imagine Bedrock and you want to party on Bedrock, Party Rock is a great tool. It's an online tool that enables you with no coding necessarily experience and no AI experience to sort of construct applications on top of Amazon Bedrock using language models or using foundation models, not just language models, but foundation models, multimodal models. And so you can go into Party Rock and define what you want your application to do and give it some constraints and some direction, and it will build a small application for you. It's not a production application, but it gives you a chance to experiment and play around.
Yeah, well, that's why, and maybe I can call this self-promotion. That's why I think this podcast is so important. In some ways, it feels like it's all over the map with the various people that we interview and things like that. But the reason I think it's important is you get ideas, you get real deep understanding of what this new technology is, how it can be used, and somewhere in there you can find your personal nugget based on what you need to do, what you're dreaming of doing, anything like that. And then the final piece of that puzzle are the products you're talking about, mm-hmm. that you can just jump right in and get it done, instead of, many times you're unless you have a huge team yourself, you can't do anything with this, but now you can. It's sort of the excitement in the industry now is really measurable. It's because of this. What you guys are doing is enabling amazing things. So
and so much of what we do in building tools for developers has always been about abstracting the complexity of the underlying systems, whether that was building languages to abstract the underlying sort of assembly language, or building tools or frameworks to abstract how things are done. In this case, what we're doing with things like Bedrock and with Amazon Q is we're abstracting the complexities of artificial intelligence and generative AI to make it more accessible to more organizations and more companies, so that they can have these ideas and they can go experiment with them and build them without having to spend the effort to get that depth of knowledge. I think over time, there's going to be a large collection of foundation models available for generative AI, but having services like Bedrock and having services like Q that make them very accessible is going to be so important for organizations.
So all this will also materialize in sort of responsibility, I'll put it under.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as AWS, moves forward down all this, what role do they see themselves playing? So AWS themselves, when it comes to responsible use of both artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how does it reflect on the products you're talking about?
I'll tell you, we've taken a very deliberate, intentional approach to responsible AI since we started building these tools. You mentioned in the intro, we have Amazon Q as our digital assistant, and we have a product called Code Whisperer, which was an extension to the developer IDE that would help with generative AI, code generation, things like that. Amazon Q and Code Whisperer kind of come together into one thing. So you install the Code Whisperer extension, and Amazon Q is part of that experience. So you can think of Amazon Q as the AI behind Code Whisperer. But when we first started building Code Whisperer, this was the first generative AI service that we built. And so we took a very intentional approach to responsible AI and wanted to make sure that was like a key tenet for us. It's kind of part of our DNA and how we work. And so we took this approach that responsible AI is a shared responsibility. Like there's like many things in cloud, it's a shared responsibility between our customers and us, but we certainly have a role to play. So for things like Amazon Q, for example, at the user level, we provide a lot of, I'll call them guardrails and mechanisms to ensure that the code and the recommendations and the assistance that's coming to the user, the individual developer that's using this tool, meets a high criteria for responsibility in terms of not including toxic scenarios and biased language and things like that, but also making sure that, for example, if the code suggestions have a high similarity to some licensed open source code, that we're able to identify that and tell the developer that, hey, this code suggestion has this similarity to some licensed open source code. You're welcome to use it, but you should go look at the implications of using this open source code so you can use it responsibly. And that becomes part of that shared responsibility. Same with, we talked about Code Guru Security, which is actually integrated into these products so that you can do things like look for security vulnerabilities and we'll give you code suggestions to remediate those vulnerabilities. So at the user level, we're able to provide a lot of these guardrails, but the user also bears some responsibility for how they use that product. At the administrative level with some of these things, so Amazon Q is a very broad product and covers a lot of different scenarios. And so the administrator is able to have some control over that. So for example, Q for developers, the administrator can make a sort of a policy type decision as to whether or not the code suggestion should even include open source references or not, or we should just filter those out. Or for Q for business, the administrator can make some decisions or set some policies around who has access to what information so that Amazon Q will only respond with the appropriate information for that individual user. And then from our side of the equation, kind of on the back end, we do a tremendous amount to make sure that the application of artificial intelligence meets a high responsibility bar. Some of that is making sure that for our customers who are using our paid services, that their content, their code and things like that is never used to train the foundation model so that their IP is protected, safe, and secure. Making sure that we're doing the right work to validate what's coming out of the foundation models in response to the queries, looking for accuracy and relevancy, and like I said, filtering for toxicity and bias, which can unfortunately happen in language models that are or foundation models that are trained on large-scale services. And then through things like our AI service cards, being really transparent about how our AI systems are built and what we're doing with them, and making sure all those capabilities are out there. So there's a lot that we're doing, sort of in the responsible AI umbrella, and we take it very seriously. Like I said, it was one of those initial tenets where we said, if we're going to build anything in AI, responsibility is like probably more important than almost anything else.
It's, some of what you said, I've had to live through recently myself. And let's just go, you mentioned IP, of course. So if a company's out trying to build a product and they're using your products, but they do end up with open source code, that becomes an issue for IP. I don't know that it's an unsurmountable one. I'm actually not through knowing which quite honestly, which lawyer to really know has the right answer, because I'm getting various answers. But can you get true IP on open source code? Well, if you don't change it at all, I think the answer is no. That's my opinion. But if you do change it, it becomes questionable. So when we talk about responsible use and everything you just described, Doug, that's how important it is. It's important in directions you might not even think of, but
Yeah.
with your products, they will think of it. And I assume questions will come back, or it will just eliminate things, or address it to minimize problems down the road. How'd you like to build a product, not get that proper advice, and find out after the fact that you've got major issues? So what you
Yeah.
guys are doing, I think, is critically important.
Well, I'll
Mhm.
add to that. Like a lot of times, we collectively, humans, like to try to personify AI, and so in doing so, in the same way, if we think of Amazon Q as a developer assistant, if we personify Q as a person, we want it to work in the same way. To say, like, if you and I are coding together and you're pulling some code from an open source repo, you would tell me. You'd be like, "Hey, I found this code over in this open source repo. I think we can use it. We just have to follow these guidelines. Let's do that." Or you would hopefully not introduce toxic or biased code or things like that into the code base. So we want Amazon Q to behave in those same kind of conscious and responsible ways that we as humans would behave.
I'm looking to sort of define the differentiation, so which we may have just defined, but it's a question to you. With both Q and Code Whisperer, how do they differentiate themselves from other AI-powered coding assistance tools that are available?
Yeah, we've kind of touched on a bunch of those. So at the core of it, Q does a couple of different things. So we have this concept of like predictive code suggestion. So as I'm working on code in my code editor, kind of like we would get with sort of traditional autocomplete, where I write a class name, I hit a period, I see the methods or the properties that are associated to that class. That's relatively simple code completion. With predictive code suggestions, we take the context of what you're working on and we try to guess at where we think you're headed with that. And Amazon Q will make a suggestion about the code that we think you need. And which is remarkable in terms of, with the right context, we can be pretty accurate about where we think you're headed with that. And if I can, through the use of Amazon Q, I can write 20, 30, 40 lines of code in a few seconds that might have taken me a couple minutes to write, or even longer if I had to go look something up. A lot of times the code suggestions will answer a question you might have and say, oh yeah, that's how I do that. So the code suggestions are key. That's pretty common for these coding assistants. That's kind of the table stakes, if you will. The conversational aspect extends that. So the ability to move from predictive code suggestions to having a conversation with Q, to be able to ask questions or ask Q to do something on your behalf, to say, hey, can you write a test for this function? Or can you refactor this function? Can you optimize this in some way? Or simply, actually, one of the most common things is, hey, I'm looking at code I've never looked at before. Can you just explain it to me and tell me what it does? Like, the ability for language models to summarize large amounts of content into succinct paragraphs is fantastic. And so that's actually really powerful. But those are kind of the table stakes, if you will. So what really differentiates us are some of the things we've done to address areas adjacent to all that. So we mentioned some of these things already, like making sure we're really responsible in how we generate those conversations and that code, in terms of bias filtering and looking for toxicity, and even the referencing open source code so that you know what you're using or have the ability to make a decision not to use that code. But we further augment that, if you will, with the ability to look for security vulnerabilities. So oftentimes that gets overlooked, and that happens further down the line. And so we talk a lot about shifting left, like bringing some of those capabilities earlier into the development cycle, finding those things closer to the source of when they happen. So giving the developer the ability to say, hey, scan my code. Hey, Q, take a look at my code. Tell me if there's any security vulnerabilities, or maybe if I'm not following some best practices. Tell me where that's happening, and where you can, just give me the code to change that and make it easy for me. And so this is a fantastic way to bring some of that technology earlier in the cycle, and really kind of helps differentiate us. What's more interesting, I think, is this concept of customization. And so, like at Amazon, we use these tools, and what we found early on was that the applicability of them was sort of mixed, because we have so much proprietary code. We have all these internal frameworks and libraries and things that we use. And every large enterprise company I talk to has the same situation. They've created their own abstractions for things. They put wrappers around things. They have their own code. And these public coding assistants don't know anything about that private code. And so the ability to create a customization and say, hey, Amazon Q, I want you to look at this code and understand what we do here. And so when you make code suggestions or you answer questions for me, do so in the context of how we do it here, which really makes it much more applicable to how an organization might work. I always equate it, again, going back to the personification of like a tool like Amazon Q, kind of off the shelf, if you will, is like the developer that starts in your company on the first day. With the customization, it's like the developer who's been there a few years and kind of knows where everything is and knows how you do things and knows how to write code the way that you write code. So that's tremendously fantastic.
By the same token, if I had a developer or even a team of developers and something changed in my company and I don't have some of them, the key people or whatever, isn't it true that I could then do a whole code audit through your product? It sounds like, yeah.
To some degree, you could, certainly. And I think that's where like one of the reasons why a code explanation is used so heavily by people is oftentimes code exists and the people that wrote it aren't around anymore, or they're on a different team, or maybe they've gone to a different company. And certainly as a developer, I can read through the code and kind of reason my way through it and figure it out. But if somebody could just give me the summary, like write the documentation for this code and tell me what it does, like that's fantastic. Yeah. But there's two areas I think that really significantly differentiate Amazon Q, which is this ability to assign work to Amazon Q to go do on your behalf and come back when it's done and tell you it's done. One of those is the ability to upgrade Java applications. And so we have this code transformation capability that Amazon, you can basically open up a Java project, like a Java 8 or Java 11 project, and say, hey, Q, transform this to a modern Java 17 project. And Amazon Q will go off and create a work plan, come back and say, okay, here's my proposal. You'll say yes or no, make a change, whatever. And then it will go off and do the work. It'll actually spin up the application in the development environment, validate it, make the changes, validate it, do all that work, and come back with a change set to say, okay, I've upgraded the application. You can review it and you can commit it. So the developer is still the human in the loop, right? They're still taking the responsibility for it. But we had a team of 5 developers who did 1,000 production Java upgrades in 2 days. It was an average of about 10 minutes per upgrade, which is like phenomenal. Like I talked to so many customers who are like, these massive like multi-year Java upgrade projects. So this is really remarkable. That's one huge differentiator. And then we have another capability where you can essentially assign work to Q by giving it a descriptive prompt around a feature you want built. If you use a product like Amazon Code Catalyst, you can actually create a work item and assign that work item to Amazon Q. And it's kind of the same process. Amazon Q will go create the work plan and say, okay, based on what you told me, this is what I'm going to go do. And it'll look at your whole project context and say, oh, I need to make changes in these 5 files and I need to do these different things. It'll go off and do the work. And it'll come back with the change set and you can review it and submit the pull request. So it's like having an an assistant developer working for you that you can just kind of assign some work to. It's amazing.
The person/company that's aware of all this and starts utilizing it is wildly ahead of its competition. Let's jump into sort of the next big thing for both AI and Amazon. So how does customization with Amazon's generative AI tools like Q align with your vision of the future of AI innovations?
I think this is probably the core of a big part of the future is being able to shift from these sort of off-the-shelf generic coding tools to ones that deeply understand my organization and my business and what I'm doing. Like I said, that's the difference between a developer that just started and a developer that's been there a few years, and what they know about and what they're able to do and how they're able to help solve some of those challenges. So I think that's going to be that ability to customize, to say, hey, I want to take this tool, this AI, and I want it to reason over my code assets and my documentation and build a level of understanding such that it can be as effective as a veteran developer in my organization. So I think the customization is going to be a really key thing for how we move forward and how companies use these various AI tools.
And let's talk about data security for
Yeah.
a bit, and something that's helpful for our listeners. And what key factors should our listeners consider in order to ensure that their data security and privacy are respected when using various AI models?
Let me maybe talk a little generically about it, and then I'll talk about what we do. So if you're considering using an AI tool, particularly with software development, this is often where for an organization some of your most sensitive IP exists. This is maybe outside of your actual database. The code that you write is often your key. That's your competitive differentiator. And so anytime you're looking at any AI tools that you want to use to accelerate, you have to look at some of these things we've already talked about. What are the privacy and security best practices of the organization that is building and providing the AI? Who are they serving? Are they already being used by a lot of people? Are they already trusted in some regard in that sense? And how transparent are they around their approach to responsible AI? I think this is a really important aspect of like knowing what the provider of the AI is kind of doing behind the scenes and how they're working. So from our standpoint, if we go through those like privacy and security best practices, this is like, core capabilities of AWS in terms of data encryption, both in transit and rest, and keeping our customers' data isolated and separate, and how we do these things, like making sure we support common compliance capabilities like GDPR compliance and HIPAA eligible. I mentioned HealthScribe earlier, so HIPAA eligible services, things like that. And we talked a lot about our approach to responsible AI, and I think, like I mentioned, a key part of that is the transparency that the organization has towards responsible AI, so you can understand their position, understand what they're doing, understand, like in our case, where we're advocating with the White House around AI guidance, things like this. Like those are the things I think are really important for someone to look at.
And I'd suggest, with all that you've described, that AI has already changed coding forever. And let's talk about human in the loop.
Yeah.
It's an ethos that we have at our Edge of NFT podcast we do. And considering the integration of AI into DevOps, how much human interaction does AWS currently deem necessary for effective operation and for oversight?
Well, I'll say I'm with you, and I think human in the loop is critical. I think, certainly, at least not today, AI services are not at a point where we would say they can run without a human in the loop. Like, you need some oversight, you need some trust but verify, if you will, whatever you want to imagine. And so the way I tend to think about this is sort of use case dependent. And so if you imagine an X and Y axis, where the Y axis is trust in AI for a particular use case, and the X axis is the amount of human in the loop necessary. As trust increases, the amount of human in the loop decreases. But this, like I said, is going to be very use case specific. How much can I trust an AI in a given use case? So, for example, predictive code generation, while the code generation is of high quality and good and things like that, I would label that as kind of a lower trust exercise, because it's predictive. We're guessing. We think we understand what you're doing. We're guessing what you want. And that's true for any coding assistant. And so the trust has to be a little bit lower because it's predictive. And so you have to review every suggestion to make sure it's appropriate for what you're doing. So the human in the loop is very high. It's more of what I would call AI assistance. We're working together on every step, and we're looking at it in everything we do. Now, as that trust increases to where you can do maybe less frequent human in the loop, less verification. In other words, I mentioned this ability to have Amazon Q transform an application or build a feature for you, where you give enough context in terms of what the requirements are and what you're expecting the outcome to be. And then the first step is you agree on a plan between the human and the AI. And then the AI goes off and does that work. Then the human in the loop is less frequent. They can go do a lot of work without a human in the loop, but the human is still there to do the verification at the end. And so this starts to shift a little bit into what we might think is like AI augmentation. I'm actually extending the capabilities of myself or my team by leveraging AI to do more, to handle more workload than I could have done otherwise. I still have to have that verification step. I'm still not going to let that code get committed without doing a review, much like I would do with a developer on the team. Nobody's going to commit code without a peer review. But similar like to that. And I do believe where we're headed towards is a level of AI autonomy, or maybe semi-autonomous, where I still think we'll have human in the loop. I think we'll never eradicate the need for human in the loop. And I personally think that's one of the things you would always need. You always need a seatbelt and an airbag in a car, right? You need human in the loop. And I think there will be use cases that we identify where we can enable AI to be more autonomous and do more on our behalf, where the level of trust can be relatively high because the risk is relatively low. So things like using AI to do monitoring and alerting and some of these other capabilities, and like in a live site instance where you're using AI as an on-call agent or something like that to detect and make small changes to what's happening. And if there is an incident, to use the AI to collect information from logs and things like that. Like I mentioned, these models are really good at summarizing large amounts of data. So to be able to gather a whole bunch of data and summarize it for the human who's actually going to look at the problem and try to mitigate it, then your trust in AI is much higher, so your human in the loop is much lower. And so I kind of view it on that continuum, if you will, of trust and human in the loop. Trust goes up, human in the loop goes down, but it's never gone.
It's continuous improvement process as well, right? I mean, It's just that we have to have a lot more humans looking at things because we don't completely trust what's going on. But as every day goes on, that balance is going the other way. Full autonomous functionality. Generative AI, it's going to drive revenue growth. There's no question about that. It's already happening. And as well as that is a lot of business transformation. But referring not just to Amazon itself, but the global economy. In the coming years, what do you see this materializing, this change?
We've seen this before lots of times. Whenever we have these new technologies where we're sort of abstracting the complexity of something, we're accelerating the rate at which people can do things, and then it creates new opportunities. I think there's maybe a couple areas to think about in this case. There's what will happen. Let me asterisk. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an economist. But I do think one of the things we'll see happen is organizations, that serve customers will find the use of these tools as a way to accelerate them. So I often say what people really want, what businesses and organizations really want is to go from an idea that they have that will provide business value to providing that business value instantaneously and for free, right? Just it is. And so our whole objective in building things is to reduce the time it takes to as close to instantaneous and free as possible. And so the use of AI does that. It starts to reduce, the time to market. So I think what we'll see is this increasing speed of time to market, where ideas get to market faster, and we'll see competition in various spaces heat up as people are able to realize like I talked about earlier, just realizing ideas that we've had over the last 10 or 20 years. Now that we have these tools available to us, changes things. And so we'll see this, decrease in the amount of time it takes to get an idea to market. And we'll also see new ideas coming to market. This opens up a huge portfolio of opportunity. You can imagine going from the 16 crayon set to the 64 crayon set with the sharpener in the back. You have so much more you can work with, and there's so much more you can do, that organizations will come up with new ideas. It's amazing what humans are capable of imagining and thinking of. And so we'll see lots of great new things come to market in this sense.
Well, one of the concerns that I think most people have in the industry and outside the industry even more so is to prevent over-reliance of AI. And I know AWS takes that kind of serious as well. And how do you ensure that developers maintain critical thinking and problem-solving skills? A lot of the things we've talked about here, is there anything AWS is doing to help protect that nugget?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to this, right? I think one is these tools actually increase the creativity and problem solving because they give you a new set of capabilities that you can work with. And so I think being able to take away some of the things that require attention from developers and development organizations that are mundane or routine, and being able to say, hey, let's have AI do that so I can put more of my creative human cognitive ability into problem solving or innovating or inventing things. So I think that's key. I think, again, from our philosophy, much of what we do is about human in the loop. Let's find ways to reduce the parts of the process that humans don't need to do, the repetitive, the mundane. Like if I can generate a piece of code for you that stops you from having to spend 10 minutes searching the internet for an answer to something, and you can get that in a couple seconds, I've done a great job. A big part of that is, how do I take a 5-minute job and make it a 2-minute job? How do I make a 10-minute job into a 5-minute job? And so then you have more time for the creative aspects of things. Like, I'm super excited. I have 2 kids. I have a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old. And the world they are growing up in is so much different than the world I grew up in, and the tools they have available to them. I have my son is 13. He plays a lot of video games, and I hear him talking with his friends. And there's just so many times where I hear them talking about AI, because AI is just a part of their life now. It's just like another character in the thing that they do. And so it's super incredible. I've often been cited as making an analogy to calculators, and I know a lot of people do this, but calculators don't make anybody less good at math. They just do the hard math for you. You still have to understand math. You still have to know how to do it. My daughter, who's 17, went through a lot of mathematics class in elementary school and had to learn how to do everything on paper. My son's still at that point where he's having to do lots of stuff on paper. But then when she got into high school, she was required to bring a calculator to class because, let's not spend time doing the hard stuff that you know how to do. Let's get that done quickly and focus on the other part of this, which is the cognitive problem solving around whatever the given situation is.
I think you describe both sides of it, because I've always believed that one of the reasons you learn math isn't for the math itself. It teaches you how to think, how to reason, how to problem solve, actually. And it sounds like your kid's got both of those things at the right time of development. And I think that that's critically important. We're gonna head for the next segment, and this one should make you a little nervous, Doug. But it's called AI Wants to Know, and it's because AI is curious, and so are we. 10 questions. They're designed to uncover the intriguing human mysteries that AI longs to comprehend but can't quite grasp. It's a snack break in our journey, so let's keep the answers quick. But the safety belt, it's off. So if you feel you can occasionally roam about the cabin, exploring more of who you are and what makes you tick. You ready to go?
I feel like I'm on a game show. I'm ready.
You are.
I got my buzzer. I'm ready to go.
Guys, what's the first thing you ever remember being proud of?
That's a hard one to answer. I can tell you, I remember as a kid, I'll relate it to what we're talking about here, is that I remember, while I wasn't a developer per se, I remember writing my first program. I was, I think, about 11 years old. My brother, who's now a scientist, was also 2 years older than me, very into STEM. So we had a TRS-80, for those of you who remember the Tandy TRS-80, which had a cassette tape storage system. And I was really into choose your own adventure books. And so I wrote a choose your own adventure program using BASIC on a TRS-80, which was just a lot of like go-to statements, basically. It was like print text on screen and then go to, like wait for it, print text on screen, wait for a selection, go to another section of the program. So,
but it still put you way ahead of the curve. Well, good.
Oh, it was so fun. I loved it.
Not on that, and especially the timing. Yeah. Okay, question number 2. What do you need help with that you wish you did not?
Talking to people like yourself. Talking to the press. I have a lot of help talking to the press.
Okay. And you're much in demand, so we appreciate you being here. What do others look to you for help with?
I will say I spend a lot of time mentoring people, either people that have worked for me in the past or people that I've worked with. And a lot of that tends to be around building high functioning teams, actually, probably more so than technology, is like, how do you build a team that can function and deliver really good software?
Man, is that a never-ending education right there?
I spend a lot of time learning in that space, yeah.
Yeah. What do you treasure most about your human abilities?
So, it's some of the stuff we've been talking about. Like, human creativity is just amazing to me. It is incredible to me. And maybe part of this is too, having a couple of kids, like watching what humans are able to create. And the fact that any two of us, like you and I, given any circumstance, can come up with completely different ideas around it because of the entire context of our lives that colors how we think about those things. It's amazing.
Wow. And what comes to me is the answer that you and I working together might come up with. If either one of us then work with someone else, that answer would be completely different.
Yeah. If you imagine humanity as a large supercomputer, it's incredible, like the variety of things that we can come up with. Creativity is amazing. I love it.
So throughout your whole life, what is the most consistent thing about you?
Inconsistency would be the answer. I am consistently inconsistent, unfortunately. Probably not a positive characteristic, but
Oh no, I kind of think it creates an adventurous life. But throughout your whole life, what has changed the most?
Man, it seems a little bit like a cheating answer given the context of the show. But what I'll tell you is, you might notice from my gray goatee that I'm a little older. I was actually born just a couple weeks before Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon.
Wow.
Now, what's amazing about this, and I've actually spent a lot of time looking into this, and my son and I have spent time looking into this. I've got a Lego model of the Saturn V in my closet over here. Those astronauts went from the Earth to the moon in essentially a relatively small tin can that had a 70-pound computer that ran at less than 1 megahertz with around 32 kilobytes of RAM and less than a megabyte of read-only memory, which is and they made it to the moon and back.
Yeah, right? And they made it
with a 70-pound computer that big. And then, I walk around with this thing in my pocket, and like a TikTok video requires more compute power than that. And so it's really amazing. And especially like when you think about the experiences we have today, like we've all been this, and we've all been this person, and we can look at ourselves a little bit critically in this, and that we find ourselves in a relatively similar tin tube flying at 500 miles an hour, 30,000 feet off the ground. And we're mad because we can't stream a video on a computing device that's in our pocket while 200 other people are doing the same thing. Like it's incredible. And so the idea that like the technology has advanced so far since then, just in my lifetime, like from the time I was born till now, and then now we're like building AI systems that do all these incredible things. Like it's so amazing. Like it's just overwhelming sometimes.
It's such a snowball because if you look at what we've seen in our lifetimes change, but then if you look at what we've seen change in the last 5 years or 10 years, that snowball is growing because now we have computers making the changes of computers, right? It's just, we can't even imagine the years that your kids are going to be living through.
Oh, yeah. Ironically, it's still written instructions from a human to a computer that cause the computer to do the things that the human enjoys. So like some things haven't changed.
Correct. Well, how about this one? We're going to go to number 7, which is, what do you find strangest about reality?
So this is partially due to how like I spend so much time with technology and things like that. But like I love the world of technology where you can do things like copy and paste and replace things. So I find the realness of reality kind of weird. So there's so many times I was building a fence over the weekend in my yard. I would love to just be able to like copy paste. But like I can't. I have to spend hours and then I'm sore the next day and do all these things like. I love it, but it's so strange when you spend so much time thinking about worlds that are digital.
Good. The problem I'd like you to solve is when you're building a home for a person, a couple, a family, get them to understand that the process is the same as it's been for 100 or 200 years.
That's the problem with it. I built my house. There's so many times I want to be like, cut this out, move it over there.
Yeah, it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So you've obviously had that feeling, momentary feeling of being alive that just kind of comes on you.
Mm-hmm.
What's the last time you remember feeling alive at that level?
Man, I feel like I should say I was skydiving or bungee jumping or something like that, because I feel like it was because I was really sore on Monday after spending the weekend building a fence. I felt pretty human. I felt pretty constrained by my humanness. Like this idea that like we have soft tissue and we can exert ourselves and do things like that's pretty alive. Like, don't get me wrong, I went ATVing in Hawaii, and I was like pretty exhilarated. The adrenaline was really high, but it's the normal stuff that makes you feel pretty alive.
Hey, I'm with you. I'm with you. What is your most unique trait?
I'm a quick study. I feel like I have this general philosophy that I can learn anything by reading a book about it, and so that may or may not be true. I have to do it at some point in time. So, like, playing guitar is actually really challenging for me because I can read a book about it, but that doesn't mean I can do it. So,
Yeah. So we're going to head into the next segment, which is about AI leaders and influences. So tell us about some leaders that you notice in the world of AI, and tell us who you would love to, to see even come on this podcast, but in general, you'd like to see more of.
Yeah, I think AI is interesting because so much of the inspiration of AI actually comes not from those of us who are building AI. We get inspiration from, I think in a lot of cases, things like science fiction. A lot of the things that we do, like even building things like Amazon Q as a digital assistant, there's so many experiences or so many examples in science fiction for going back decades of like these computer assistants and digital assistants and things. So I often find like most of my inspiration comes from things like science fiction and being like, man, that would be amazing if we could build that, and then the technology catches up and we can find ways to it. I mean, that's incredible. I think in terms of people that I would be really interested, I would actually love to see on your show, and I would tune in. There's probably two that pop off my head right away. One of them is our own Matt Wood here at AWS. He's the VP of AI.
I'm sorry, he's the
VP of AI
Got
here
it.
at AWS. He has a remarkable perspective on technology and on artificial intelligence. He's very active on posting things about artificial intelligence. He's a very engaging person to talk to, so I think you'd have a great conversation with him. I'm a big fan of his, so I think I would love to watch him on your show. And the other one is a colleague of mine from many years ago, also a guitarist, but that is not the reason to have him on your show. He's a phenomenal jazz guitarist, actually. His name is Don Box. And Don Box has a long career in technology, building some really amazing things throughout his history across service-oriented architectures and different technologies, working on things like switching from sort of traditional enterprise software to physical devices, working on things like gaming devices. And now today he works at Facebook Reality Labs, where he's working on augmented reality. He is absolutely intriguing to talk to. I would put him in the category of genius and super engaging and a pleasure to talk to at any time.
Well, that's fantastic. If you happen to know their X handles or anything else, certainly let us know that, and we'll be able to pass that on to the benefit of the listeners. So those are two great mentions right there. Let's talk about resources themselves now. Resources for AI specifically, maybe for enterprises, and then also just for individuals.
Yeah, I'll say for enterprises, we have a ton of documentation and things available for things like Amazon Bedrock and Amazon Q. We have various, standard documentation, videos, things like that. There's tons of stuff. So, if you did a quick search on Amazon Q or Amazon Bedrock, you'd find all kinds of information. We actually created what we call the AWS Generative AI Innovation Center, which is a $100 million investment into this program where customers can come and see AI in action, experience it, try some of these things out. We actually did some various projects with other third parties to bring them into the Innovation Center. One recently was done with Wind River, where they're using Amazon Q as part of their development sequence for their automotive development, which is amazing. For the average Joe, if you will, for the everyday man, if you will, I love Party Rock. I mentioned Party Rock earlier. It's super fun to go play with. Like I mentioned, it's an experimental playground. It actually was developed out of something we had built internally. We called the LLM Playground, which was just a way for us to play with different models, our own models and third-party models, and experiment with them. And we used it a lot. And we're like, let's just productize this thing. Let's make it a thing that people can go play with. And so it's a great tool to just go and experiment with what generative AI can do without having to actually build the application yourself. You can give it prompts, you can give it direction, you can change things. I built like a Twitter post generator where it would generate, it's a multimodal experience, so I can have it generate I think I did had to generate claymation style imagery based on the description that I provided, and then it would provide a summary of an article and things like that. And then we also have this, what we call our AI ready commitment, to provide free AI skills training to 2 million people by 2025. So we're investing a ton in educational content and making it readily available and accessible to anybody who wants to learn. AI is, I think you said it earlier, like this has been a really sort of pivotal transformation in what's happening with software development, that we really want to enable people to learn as much as they can about AI and generative AI. So we're making all of these things available, skills training, certifications, all of these things. So all of those things are out there. We'll make sure we have the links people can get them.
Super helpful. Those are great lists. Okay, the level of value that listeners are going to get out of everything you've said today, but all of these little tips that you've given are great. I have one nuanced question for you. The term party rock, I don't know if it ties into your Bedrock product or those guitars on your wall. Where did that name come from?
Well, name is one of the hardest problems in software development. I believe the name came out of the fact that we built a tool that would enable you to party on Bedrock.
Okay, there you go. So where can listeners go to learn more about you and the projects you're working on? How do they follow you and stay close to what you're doing?
I'm most active, probably me personally, I'm most active on LinkedIn. I tend to post a lot of things on LinkedIn, so look for me there. I do post occasionally on X, probably not as commonly as I do on LinkedIn.
Doug, you've been an amazing guest, so thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Ron. This was super fun. Anytime. I would love to come and do it again. It's great.
Well, it's time for another safe landing at the outer edges of the AI universe for today. This is your Captain Ron, and on behalf of our guest and the entire crew, I'd like to thank you for choosing to voyage with us today. We wish you a safe and enjoyable continuation of your journey. When you come back aboard, make sure to bring a friend. Our starship, it's always ready for more adventurers. If you're listening, go to Spotify or iTunes right now, rate us and say something awesome. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and pass this episode to a friend or two. Your support and your feedback mean the world to us. Don't forget to visit edgeofai.xyz, where you can learn more about the partnering and subscribe to the Outer Edge newsletter for the latest Edge of company news, events, and show drops. In addition, connect with us on all the major social platforms. Just search for edgeof_AI. And you can join the conversations that are happening there. And before we sign off, mark your calendars for our next voyage, where we continue unraveling AI's mysteries and advancements. Until then, bye-bye.
The views and opinions expressed on Edge of AI reflect solely those views and opinions of the show hosts and its guests. Please make sure to do your own research. While we make every effort to ensure that the information about AI technology is accurate and up to date, we cannot guarantee its accuracy, completeness, or timeliness. We make no representations or warranties of any kind with respect to the information, products, or services discussed. Please be aware AI may occasionally generate incorrect or misleading information and produce offensive or biased content. Under no circumstances shall we be liable for any loss or damage, including, without limitation, indirect or consequential loss or damage, or any loss or damage arising from loss of data or profits arising out of or in connection with the use of technology discussed on our podcasts. Additionally, our show is not financial advice. You understand that you are using any and all information available on or through this podcast at your own risk. Whenever making financial decisions, we recommend doing your own research and talking to your accountant for financial advice. Lastly, time to time, we may feature sponsored content on the show for which we receive value, and we may share links for which we receive a commission if you make a purchase through one of these links. Refer to our website, edgeofai.xyz, for our full disclaimer, terms and conditions, privacy policy, and copyright notice.